This SOL review video will focus on slope, distance, and midpoint, in addition to a little bit with median and altitude, but more so just what those things are about. So the first question is asking you for the slope between -2, 3 and 1, 1. And from here, what you need to do is graph it and count. Now on the SOL you will have graph paper, so you just need to plot your points, and then you can do rise over run. Right, so you don't even have to use the formula. Of course you can, you don't have to. So if I plot the point -2, 3, that would be right here, and then 1, 1 is right here. And so I want to count rise, so how many do I go down, and then how many do I go over. And it turns out that we are going down 1, 2, and over 1, 2, 3. So rise of 2, run of 3. But look at the slant of this line. It's slanting this direction, and that is the negative slant. So that would be a -2/3. So B would be your answer. Now, if you use the formula for it, you would take y2 minus y1 and put it over x2 minus x1. So it doesn't matter which order you put your coordinate points in. What matters is that you have them lined up correctly. So if I did it the other way and did 1 minus 3, I would put it over 1 minus a -2, which then gives me a -2 over a +3, but this and this and this, those are all the same thing. All right, now number 2, which point is the greatest distance from the origin? So the origin is the coordinate point 0, 0. And distance, we have two options. We can do the distance formula. So you can do the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared, or just use the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And so really what it ends up being is to get your distance, you have to do your square root of everything at the end. So if we're doing the point 0, 0, and we're going to 0, -2, so right here, how far down is that? And so if you're doing your a squared plus b squared equals c squared, you're literally just going down, right? So if we're doing that, all you have to do is look at these two coordinate points. And I'm actually going to move this out of the way because I don't even really need it. So if we have the point 0, 0 and 0, -2, how far apart are 0 and 0? None at all. So it's 0 squared. Plus, how far apart are 0 and -2? So if you have a number line, -2 is here, here's -1, here's 0. And the distance here is 2. So we take 2 and square it, and it all goes under the square root. And so that's going to leave us with the square root of 0 plus 4, which is the square root of 4, which is really just 2. So this gives us a distance of 2. Then we go through that same all those steps again, except this time with 0, -5. So we're going from 0, 0 to 0, -5. So 0 to 0, how far apart? 0, and we square it. 0 and -5, how far apart? They are 5, and we square it, and we put everything under the square root. So we end up with the square root of 0 plus 25, which is the square root of 25, which is just 5. So the answer for this one gives us 5 as our distance. So now we'll go to C. And so far, as of right now, we can take A out because B is definitely further from A, so we'll just cross that one out. So now we have -2, 0. Well, so we're starting at 0, 0, and we're going to -2, 0. So 0 and -2 are 2 apart from another on the number line, and we add to that 0 squared because 0 and 0 are nothing. So we get the square root of 4 plus 0, which is the square root of 4, which is 2. So this one gave us 2. So that's also out because A and C are the same, and so far B is the furthest away. And then we have to go through our last one. So this time we're going from 0, 0 to 0, -12. So the distance between 0 and 0 is nothing squared, plus on a number line that -12 and 0 are 12 units apart, and you square that and put it all under a square root. So we end up with the square root of 0 plus 144, which gives you the square root of 144, which is the, not the square root, it's just 12. So this distance is 12, leaving you with D as your answer. Now you can use this whole formula. I just think it's a little bit easier to group them in this way. Oops. Okay, so number 3, we're looking for the length of CD, and M is the midpoint. So if this is the midpoint, then that means that these two things here are congruent. So if they are congruent, so CM is congruent to MD, which would mean then that CM equals MD. And since CM is 5x, we set that equal to MD, which is 2x plus 42. So we subtract 2x from both sides of our equation to get 3x equals 42. Divide by 3 on both sides of your equation to get x equals 14. So x is 14, but the question is asking you to find CD, so we have to plug the 14 back in. So we get 5 times 14, and then we have to add to that 2 times 14 plus 42. So this is CM plus MD to give you the whole segment. And so when we do 5 times 14, we end up getting 70. And when we do over here 2 times 14 plus 42, we get 70. And that's one way to check and know that we definitely set this problem up correctly, because we got the same number both times, which you should because it's in the middle. So CD equals 140. Whoa, I didn't want to cut that off so much. There we go, 140. All right, number 4, the distance. So 9, 2 is here, and then -1, 4 is right here. All right, so when we're doing distance, you can turn this into a right triangle and count how many down, which is 2, how many over, which is a total of 11, and then you're looking for this one, and that's essentially what I'm doing when I list it this way. If you picture a number line, -1 is here, and then a +9 is all the way up here. So they are 10 units, or I'm sorry, 10, sorry, not 11. I can count, I swear. So they're only 10 units apart. So when you do that, and then you do this and see that 2 and 4 are 2 units apart, you do 10 squared plus 2 squared, and you put it under a square root. So you get the square root of 100 plus 4, which is the square root of 104. So you could leave the answer like this depending on what they're asking you for. So this may be your answer, or they may actually give you the decimal form, which is about 10.2. So either way. All right, so number 5, if the midpoint of line segment XY is 0, -3, and X is at 4, -2, find the coordinates of Y. So this is where you want to set this thing up vertically. So Y is here, X is up here, and X is the point 0, -3. Y is the point that we're looking for, and then this is our midpoint at, oops, that's not right. Rewind. X, because I can read, is at 4, -2, and 0, -3. There we go. All right, so here's your midpoint, and I just kind of gave it its own letter because it didn't give us one. So what we want to do is look to see how far, what do we do to get from 4 to 0? We take 4 and subtract 4, we get 0. So if we take 0 and subtract 4, we get -4. Now, from -2 to -3, if we subtract 1, we get to -3. So we repeat that process, and -3 minus 1 is -4. And so this would be your missing endpoint. All right, now number 6, a slope of a line that would be perpendicular to the line that passes through 4, -1, and 9, 0. So 4, -1 is here, and then 9, 0 is here. So it's that line connecting those 2 points. So to get a perpendicular slope, you have to change the sign, whoops, and make it the reciprocal. So when we're looking at slope, we're just doing rise over run, and this is a positive slant to it, so it's a positive 1/5. So we get a positive 1/5. That is our slope of this line. So to get the perpendicular slope, we have to make it negative because it's positive, so we change the sign, and then we make it reciprocal, which is 5/1, but we write it very formally and make it just a -5. Now, if you decided to use the actual formula for slope, instead of graphing it, and let me just go ahead and do this, and if you use the formula, actually let's move this out of the way, you would take y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, which gives you a -1 over a -5, and a negative over a negative is a positive. So that's one of the biggest mistakes, is that people think this means negative, and it doesn't. It means a positive. So this is your slope. So to get your perpendicular slope, you would make it a -5/1, but then more formally, to get your perpendicular slope, just -5. Now, if you did it in the other direction, it's okay. So if you did your slope was 0 minus a -1 over 9 minus 4, it just comes out as a positive 1/5 to begin with, and then you do your perpendicular slope by making it a -5/1, which again, more formally, is just -5. So 3 different options on how to complete this problem successfully. All right, and then number 7, and then we're just going to talk a little bit about median and altitude. So if we have our coordinate points here, -1, 2, so -1, 2, 3, -5, so 3, -5. So AB is one line, so this is A and this is B down here. And so there's your line. And we want to know if that's parallel to CD. So C is at 7, 2. And D is at 0, -2. All right, well, if you're looking at this right here, obviously these are not parallel because they cross one another, right? But if we, instead of going that route, find the slope, so let's say you can graph it or you don't want to, find the slope of AB first, okay? So you take y2 minus y1 over x2 minus minus x1. So that would give you, that makes it plus, so 7 over a -4. Now when you do your slope of CD, you end up with 2 minus a -2 over 7 minus 0. And again, this becomes a plus, which leaves you with a positive 4 over 7. And these, you'll notice, are opposite sign and reciprocals. So these are perpendicular, not parallel. So you can work it out that way, you can graph it out, but sometimes when you graph them, it's a little hard to tell if they are exactly parallel. So you do want to find the slopes of both lines.